The Ostrog Monastery in Montenegro is the third most visited holy place in the Christian world after the Christ's tomb and the Holy Mount. It has a chapel built into a cliff and a monastery complex that preserves the sacrilege of Saint Basil, the Orthodox saint of miracles. So today we're going to have a look at the Ostrog Monastery. The Ostrog Monastery is a monastery of the Serbian Orthodox Church situated against an almost vertical cliff high up in the large rocks of Ostrogska Grada in Montenegro, and is dedicated to Saint Basil of Ostrog, who was buried in the monastery. The monastery was founded by Vasilij, the Metropolitan Bishop of Herzegovina, in the 17th century, and he died there in 1671. He was glorified after his death there, and today his body is now enshrined in a reliquary kept in the cave church dedicated to the presentation of the Mother of God to the temple. The present-day look was given to the monastery in 1923 to 26 after a fire which had destroyed the major part of the complex. The two little cave churches that are dug into the cliff were spared, and they are the key areas of the monument. The frescoes in the church of the presentation were created towards the end of the 17th century, and the other church, dedicated to the Holy Cross, is placed within a cave on the upper level of the monastery and was painted by Master Radul, who successfully coped with the natural shapes of the cave and laid the frescoes immediately on the surface of the rock and the south wall. In World War II, the monastery was used as a refuge for the Chetniks, and in 1943, Yugoslav partisans promised the Chetniks that their lives would be spared if they surrendered. And 23 of the Chetniks peacefully surrendered, expecting that they would be spared, but they were killed by the partisans at Ostrog Stancic, and 3 members of the extended family initially did not surrender but did not survive at Ostrog. And sources contradict each other whether the family were killed during fighting or they committed suicide at the monastery. The monastery is the most frequently visited in the Balkans and attracts over 100,000 visitors every year. And when we look into the history of this monastery and how it was actually built, again, as with so many of these structures, we don't really get much. All it really says is that Archbishop Basil founded the monastery in 1671, and he decided to build the monastery around 3 caves that were formerly used by a hermit. His body is now enshrined in the church. And the lower monastery is quite a large structure built down on a platform underneath the cave churches, but we can't really find any information on who built this, how it was built, and how it was built into a cliff. As we can see from the photos, it's actually built, the monastery part is built up on a large platform, which looks very old world to me. It has a very big wall at the front with the familiar points that we see around star forts and star cities. So who built this and how old it actually is, I'm not really sure. But of course, they're telling us in the 1670s is when it was constructed. Well, that's the date we give, that there's no timeline to how long it took to build this, who actually built it, because clearly it wasn't built by one person, Saint Basil. And of course, where did all the materials come from and the skilled craftsmen that would have been needed to construct, this amazing monastery? Like I said, it is basically 2 buildings. We have the large monastery down on the platform which is built up against the cliff. And then up above that, we have what is called the upper monastery, which is actually built into a large recess in the cliff wall. And that recess also contains the 3 caves that have now been turned into churches. In the narrative, it says that the upper monastery, which is the part that's built into the recess of the cliff and contains the 3 cave churches, was built by St. Basil in the 1670s. But the lower monastery, which is the larger part of it, which is built up on a big platform, was built in the 1800s and is centered around the Holy Trinity Church. So this monastery is actually 2 constructions, one from the 1670s, which is the white part up in the cliff from the 1600s, and the lower part, which is the larger part on the big platform, was built in the 1800s. But again, when we look into who built it and how it was built, the lower part in the 1800s, it's the same story. We really get nothing apart from it was built by the church. It doesn't tell us how long it took to be built, how it was constructed, where the materials came from, who actually built it, or any of these things. So this is, clearly an amazing structure, a feat of engineering, especially the older part, which is embedded in the cliff, built back, in a time when they tell us in the narrative that they didn't really have many tools. They didn't have, cranes or large machinery or any of this kind of stuff to actually get the materials up there and then to build it into the cliff. Because the older part is, it's quite large. It's kind of 5 or 6 stories tall. And then we have the massive, and then below we have the second part of the monastery built in the 1800s on the massive platform. But again, no story really of the construction process, and as with so many of these old world structures, it's always put down to one person who they say built it. And with the religious structures, they're always given to a saint. And, they normally say that, the parishioners are the ones who funded it, because that's another question is, where did the money come from to build this? As far as the church caves, they were done by artists, but they were already existing. And, then they came by and covered them in frescoes. But even looking at the caves, it looks a lot like this may have been a previous structure, because the walls of the cave look suspiciously like blockwork that was built. It's obviously very old and weathered, but it's the same story we get of the old world. So let me know what you think in the comments. Like, how do you think this was built? Do you have any more information on it? And of course, this monastery is one of the stops on the Great Tartarian Tour, the Bosnian Pyramids and Mysteries of the Balkans Tour, which is running from the 5th of May to the 22nd of May this year, 2024. Myself and Kelly Jones will be there, giving our perspective on all the stuff that we go and see. And we are going to be going to the Ostrog Monastery on the 14th and 15th, days 9 and 10. We will be visiting this monastery so we can get a close-up look, check it out, and see if the story that we're given makes any sense at all, which is what I do here on this channel. We love to look at the past and the story they give us, and then deep dive on it and see if that makes any sense. Because like I said, with many of these stories, the construction stories of how these were actually built, we never get any details. It's always just put down to a person who just built it, right? Which clearly is impossible. This wasn't built by one person. That's quite clear. This was a big construction that went on, but who built it, where all the materials came from and what machinery they used and would need to construct this is conveniently left out of the narrative. And like I said, when we look at the caves and the inner wall of this cliff that the first monastery is built into, it does have signs that it may have been a previous construction. It does look like there's some block work in there. So, of course, when we're there, we'll be getting some footage. We'll be getting up close and personal and getting you some more information on what this place is and our thoughts on it. Because, like I said, with so many of these old world structures, the stories just do not add up. So, thanks for spending some time with me. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this, please share it around and give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and all that kind of good stuff. And if you would like to get some more information on the Balkans tour, which is starting May the 5th, you'll find the link in the description. And there are just a few places left. So if you are interested, I would get on it now, check it out, because there won't be places left for much longer. But there you go. That is the Ostrog Monastery in Montenegro.
Remember, in the end, nobody wins unless everybody wins. Come on!